Forward. Welcome to Finding Your Light Friday. We're back. We took a few weeks off, had some summer vacations, and I'm super excited because me and this lovely lady next to me have been needing to have this conversation on camera for two months. But we're finally here, and we're going to talk about all things ketamine-assisted therapy, probably dive into psychedelic therapy, psychedelics in general. We're really excited we started a partnership with Gilson. When? April. And she is now facilitating in Illumma. Mm-hmm. And we're super excited. So Carol, do a brief intro of yourself to the tribe.
Hi, my name is Carol Gilson. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so I'm a therapist, and I'm also a supervisor of people getting their license. My goal is to start a supervision group within the next couple of months of people interested in doing this work. And I'm developing a training for other therapists and medical providers who are interested in doing ketamine-assisted therapy. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this work for the past almost 4 years. I've done close to 3,000 ketamine-assisted psychotherapy sessions, and I love coming to work every day and doing this to help people.
Yeah, so most people, especially people that watch the show, understand kind of our standard protocol, which is you come in, it's more self-guided, you work with a therapist or a coach off-site. And we've always been interested in being able to offer ketamine-assisted psychotherapists, but we really just haven't found a practitioner. And years ago, how many years? 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
We met at an event, mm-hmm. and me and her fell in love with each other. We're like, oh, I like you, you're weird, you like unicorns. Yes. This is going to be a match made. Sparkle, match made in heaven. And we actually sat down and had a conversation at that time, and it was really interesting because it was a universal timing thing. It was like mm-hmm. we weren't really established yet. Y'all were trying to figure out how everything was going to look. So it didn't match up at the time. And then luckily, through a very kismet mm-hmm. incident, which I would love you to, how did we get reconnected?
It was so annoying. I kept thinking, I should contact Ken and Allie. And then it would just fall to the wayside. I got in a car accident. And who was in the lobby waiting to see the chiropractor? Ken. I'm like, damn it. I had to get in a car wreck to talk to Ken.
Thanks, universe.
Thanks. So that's how it happened. That's how we got reconnected.
Yeah.
And the timing was perfect.
It was, and it's been amazing. And so we're really building something really different here at Illumma. And Carol's kind of guiding us, and we're the medical side, and we're really creating some really cool things, not just for Illumma, but how does this look on an expanded local level, and then hopefully on an even larger level of helping establish ketamine clinics and established therapists get into this new wave of psychedelics, which mm-hmm. the first legal route that most people have accessibility to is ketamine. Mm-hmm. And then how do we prepare as a team for, hopefully, fingers crossed, things continuing to progress through MAPS mm-hmm. To bring on other substances that we could use.
Mm-hmm. And I've already begun the training with MAPS, so as soon as MDMA is available,
we're going.
We have a beautiful room here with an en-suite bathroom that will be perfect for a day-long experience. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited about what's coming.
Yeah. So people that watch this show have heard about ketamine and how it's used here. Will you kind of go into what are kind of the key differences with the assisted therapy as opposed to kind of the self-guided therapy?
Mm-hmm. With therapy, there's someone with you throughout the entire process. You know, if you're coming in for IV self-guided, you're with the infusionist, and it takes about an hour. Mm-hmm. When you're working with a therapist, the appointment is about 2 hours long because we spend 20 to 30 minutes before the infusion talking about things that are coming up for you, what your intention might be. We may even come up with some strategies of either how to be in the medicine space looking at a particular issue, or after the medicine experience, we can begin integrating and finding ways to incorporate the insights into your daily life. So it's a more supportive way for some people who either are naive to psychedelics and have a lot of anxiety. There was a really interesting paper that came out about a year ago that talked about high anxiety limiting the effects of ketamine. So for people who are particularly anxious, having someone support them can be very, very helpful in their process. Also, people who have more complex mental health diagnoses may benefit more from therapy along with ketamine. Ketamine is great to really boost mood, but to have more longer lasting results for things that are more deeply entrenched, I think therapy is really effective.
Yeah, because we have such a wide range of clientele, and there have been people that, we just were not really equipped to handle, because it was like, this person needs more guidance, hand holding, and or there's a lot of people that would call and just feel more comfortable. Like they're like, I just would feel better if there was somebody who had a mental health background that was in the room that could help. Because I think a lot of fear and apprehension comes up for people, and I know we've talked about this, of like, something's going to come up that I don't know about.
Yes.
Like some suppressed...
Pandora's box is going to fly open.
And then what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And that can happen.
Yeah. Well, I like to describe that as we're just a little snow globe sitting on a shelf. I really should get one for one of my shelves because I talk about it. Anyway, we're a little snow globe, and this work starts to shake it up. And so things do come up in different ways than they did before. Sometimes people do have suppressed memories. And the way that I coach people, because we do a couple of prep sessions before as well, to start building the relationship and building the container that we'll be working in together. Because I really feel like working with psychedelics in general, the relationship is really important. With whoever is facilitating and the person having the experience. Whatever we have experienced, we have survived. And if it's coming back up, it's for our healing so that we can begin to learn how to thrive. So people who have had trauma or really difficult childhood experiences especially, this is something that comes up for them. And having someone with you on the journey can be really helpful for that.
Yeah, and we've even seen it, Carol has now seen a handful or more of patients here. And, patients who, and a few patients who started on the self-guided and then had kind of gotten into it and said, there's stuff coming up that I don't feel like I have enough support to kind of go into. And that's another interesting way is like, KAT is something that people can come in and out of. Like they could start with self-guided and then stuff could come up and they could go here, or they could start with KAT and maybe then maintenance. So how is that kind of, how do you view kind of that working?
I treat every person as an individual. So their treatment plan is unfolding constantly. There are some people who I've seen that have been transferred from a facility, like an inpatient facility, and they came to us with a treatment strategy suggested by the hospital, and we just followed that. But I like to monitor people, what their goals are, how they're feeling every time, and we make choices based on their goals and their symptoms. So I may see someone for 3 sessions and they have a huge breakthrough, and then they want to do self-guided or take a break. That's totally fine working with me. For example, I just worked with a woman who has pretty debilitating OCD, and we've done 3 sessions together, and she's barely having symptoms. She said that she's learned more about the driver of her symptoms, her triggers, and what to do about them than she ever has. And she's been in and out of therapy for over 20 years. So now, after 3 sessions, she's just going to call me when she feels like she wants to go at it again, because she had enough to chew on for a while. So it's very flexible, very individualized.
Yeah. I mean, Carol just really shares that personalized approach to healthcare and healing, which is like, nobody's the same. So why are there, yes, we have guidelines of like generalized protocol, and then we customize them for everybody. Can you explain what is the difference in dosing for self-guided versus KAT typically?
The first couple of sessions for KAT, I really like to keep it in a psychedelic range, which means you're aware of the room, who's in the room, and you have access to language, so that you can talk about any memories you might be having, or visions or sensations that may be uncomfortable, so that you can get support for those. I do think having a complete reset, turning off the default mode network, I like to describe that as taking the needle off the record and then changing the song. That can really happen at higher doses, whenever ego dissolving doses happen. But typically with the work that I do, that's a long-term goal. And we do a lot of talking and preparing before we get there.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that we noticed before we had a mental health provider, especially when we first started, was we would have people with super complex trauma, and if you push them too far too fast, they legitimately go straight into their trauma and will have a complete reliving of that trauma. Interestingly, for the few people that it happened with, they didn't then view it as traumatic, although I've heard some people do. They would interpret it as, oh, well, that was interesting. They would then wake up and be like, oh, I had a great infusion. And I was like, oh, well, good, because it didn't seem like you had a great infusion. Yeah. So it really can, that dissociative space for people that have complex trauma, or kind of a looser maybe grip on their, I don't know if it's ego or how you would say that, but having more guidance around that could be super helpful.
And I love incorporating transpersonal psychology, which was co-developed by some great people in the 60s and 70s. Stan Groff is one of them. And
she loves Stan Groff.
I love Stan Groff. Thank you, Stan. He talks about trauma as coming up whenever you have the capacity to look at it in a new way. So I feel like whenever we're in an altered state and we are able to look at ourselves from a different perspective, like often people describe a psychedelic experience, or ketamine, which is a psychedelic medicine, as being able to observe themselves, like taking the observer seat. So it's like you're watching it without having all the same body sensations and intensity of emotions that you would have in traditional talk therapy. So people can have breakthroughs very quickly because they're able to take an observer view. And Stan also talks about our innate wisdom and our inner healer. And the inner healer will never give us more than we're able to handle. So when difficult material comes up, it's always for our healing, and often having help either in the room or a qualified person to help with integration therapy afterwards can be years worth of therapy in one session.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. I would love, you have a really beautiful philosophy that I share around inner healer. So I would love for you to kind of dive into that and how you feel about what you actually do and what the medicine does and what the actual client does.
Okay. Well, I see ketamine as a mind, body, spirit medicine. And so the entire person and their entire experience is in the room with us. I'm feeling really nervous right now talking to a camera. What was your question?
No, it was just about how you believe we have our own innate inner healer, and you're really helping to facilitate.
Yeah, and I call myself a facilitator. Like, I've had clients jokingly call me their ketamine shaman or their guide. And I really see my position as facilitator, where when we have had a lot of trauma, there's this phenomenon that happens called broken intuition. And when our intuition is broken, then we often feel lost. We're not sure what we need or want. And we have lost the ability to trust ourselves and hear our inner voice. And I call myself a facilitator because I feel that my main job, even in talk therapy, I do have a few talk therapy clients, my main job is to facilitate the communication between the conscious mind of the individual and their inner world or their inner healer. So that's what I do. I'm always guided by the person. They are the expert of themselves. They are the expert of their experience, and they will know more about themselves than anyone else ever could. So I feel that my job is to amplify that voice that has become quiet so that they can hear it and trust it and follow that from here.
I think that's so beautiful, because that is the shift that I think is the healing empowerment shift. And the thing that isn't found in most Western medicine, Western mental health, which is a top-down hierarchy. I know what's wrong with you.
Yes.
And thus I will tell you how to fix yourself, which starts with you're broken or there's something wrong with you.
Yes. And I always start with, wow, these are highly adaptive strategies. I mean, everything that we do that is related to our trauma, any attachment wound or whatever, whether it's chaotic behavior, substance use, disrupting relationships when we're under stress, all these things are actually things that we learned and they worked, or we wouldn't keep repeating them. So I see them as strategies that we learned to survive an impossible situation. And typically by the time I see someone, they have created a world of safety for themselves. They are living a pretty good life, but there's all these old triggers. So I embrace those. I help people understand where they came from, have that compassion for that part of themselves that they need, and understand that mechanism so that it can fall away. Because often that stuff worked for them.
Yeah.
It just isn't effective anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the thing that saved you, and then it was the thing that drags you to the bottom of the ocean when you can't let go of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when I'm meeting potential clients and doing an evaluation with them, part of what I'm evaluating for is, are you expecting to be fixed? Or are you ready to dive in with me and learn some skills that you will be applying? Because I cannot fix anyone.
Yeah.
I can't. I can help you, I can be with you, I can support, but ultimately the work is yours. And I think that can feel overwhelming, because often when we're depressed and we live in a triggered state, we're working so hard already. And then I'm going to ask you to do more. I am.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be forever.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It feels overwhelming. Like I have to do another.
Yeah.
Like I'm barely it's like the water is here. You're like, I'm like doing this. But the only way that you can get better, because there are people, I think, especially with this rise, and that this would be an interesting thing to talk to you about, is with this rise of psychedelics, is, okay, here it is, the magic is here. Look, we can all do psychedelics and we'll all be better. And I think that's something that I see starting to happen, is just people leaning on psychedelics and thinking, oh, the psychedelic will fix me. Oh, I just need to do another ceremony. Oh, I just should go to Peru and then my life will be better. And whether you want to call it spiritual bypassing or, or being delusional, I think that is a big point of education that just needs to be made. Yeah.
Well, and this is part of why I like to keep in the psychedelic range in the first few sessions, because it is so easy to go into that transpersonal space, that space of unity with all things, and feel amazing, and then come back and we forgot ourselves in that. So staying in the psychedelic range, we stay in the personal. Instead of going transpersonal. I think that can be a beautiful place of remembering who we are and remembering connection. But when we're working on these deeper wounds, staying present with the self, with the ability to see the self from a different perspective, is where I feel the magic happens.
Yeah.
And this is also why I've felt very passionate about creating a training program.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of opportunity for well-meaning people to actually do harm. Either not understanding the fragile state of where a person is when they're coming out of the medicine and doing too much, saying too much. Or interpreting the person's experience for them, I think can also be dangerous, because we need to make our own meaning, especially if we're coming from that broken intuition place, where it's hard for us to trust ourselves. We'll take someone else's interpretation over ours, which I can't interpret your experience for you. In a meaningful way, because it's your experience.
Yeah, and you're almost like robbing them of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's an interesting book written called The Unintrusive Analyst, and it's all about how you can rob people of their experience or even insight. If you're dropping the seed and it wasn't theirs to begin with, they may not ever water that. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's very interesting. So what would be the difference between, because you've worked at a number of facilities, you've seen different facilitators and how they facilitate KAP or KAT, either way, whichever one floats your boat. We're going with KAT over here because we're CAT.
Ketamine-assisted therapy. And that makes more sense, I think, especially since other organizations like MAPS are going with MDMA-assisted therapy instead of psychotherapy. I thought it would make more sense. Plus, it's a huge nod to the underground world where I've learned so much about ketamine. Kit Kat, Special K, all those images of cats related to ketamine. So I'm just honoring where it came from.
Yeah. So what do you think are the most important things, like say somebody doesn't live in the Austin area and they're interested in exploring this? What are the kind of things that they should be asking or inquiring about when looking for a KAT therapist? That might be a big question.
This is very controversial.
Okay.
In the world and creating a new ethical model right now, do we require facilitators, therapists, administrators of the medicine? Do we require them to experience the medicine?
100%. And that's actually the main question I tell people to ask when they are looking for ketamine clinics. Has the doctor done ketamine?
Yes.
And not at have they gone through the protocol that they're suggesting people go through?
Yes. And I have never once asked a client to do something I haven't done and found effective.
Yeah.
And I have worked with therapists who had no ketamine experience, and they were facilitating ketamine experiences and didn't understand how important music was, or would apply the same skills that work great in a traditional talk therapy session, like a Freudian analyst, in a ketamine session. We can't do analysis in a ketamine session. It isn't appropriate to the experience, and I think it can be detrimental pulling someone out of an experience to ask them questions. So that's the question I would ask. Have you experienced the medicine?
Yeah.
How many times have you helped people do this?
Yeah.
How many times have you experienced it? I don't know. People ask me, and I'm like,
a lot.
A lot.
Yeah. More than a few.
More than a few.
And I also think, just like all therapies, the biggest thing is that, are you connected to the therapist? Have you had one, if not multiple, intake/prep sessions?
Do you feel good?
Do you feel rapport? Do you feel like you can trust them? It is really important in vulnerable states that you're working in a place where you and your nervous system feels safe, because otherwise you will not let go.
Yeah, which is also why we stay psycholytic, because the letting go happens at higher doses, and we build up to that. I've actually had a couple of clients who I felt like we had good rapport in the intake session, and then we did a couple of sessions, and then they revealed that I was actually triggering them because I reminded them of someone in their trauma story. And I always invite that, and I wondered if I should even ask that question.
Yeah.
Like, do I remind you of anyone from your past? Just to have that conversation out there. And what we have found is they felt comfortable with me and logically knew that they were triggered. So we've been able to do some magical work on the projection of that person onto me.
Yeah.
So that's one of the beauties of being on medicine, is that whoever is facilitating becomes more of a mirror of your past experiences. I've been people's mother, I've been people's sister, I've been people's bosses, and really worked through some sticky stuff together.
Yeah.
But it took them saying, I had a really difficult time with this person, and you're reminding me of them. And I'm always so grateful when people can voice that with me, because magic happens.
Yeah, it really is. Being in an altered, vulnerable state with somebody is also very bonding, and so it really hyper connects people. I mean, we see it with our infusionists all the time, and they're just holding space and putting in IVs and monitoring. They're not even really doing they're not doing therapeutic work, besides holding space, which I do think is a therapeutic work of creating a safe space for people.
Holding the container.
And people glob onto them.
Yes.
Love them.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I think training is so important, and really being mindful of who you're working with, because that power can be abused.
As we've seen in the psychedelic world.
Yes. And, we all have a shadow side, and we all need to be working on how we are with others. Are we trying to lead and save and be seen as a god
Mm-hmm.
or a guru, or are we inviting our clients to see all that
Yes.
within themselves?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that troubles me as I go to conferences, meeting people who do the work, or hearing people's personal experiences working with individuals who had this inflated sense of their role in the work.
Yeah.
It scares me. And so be aware of that.
Yeah.
Trust yourself.
Yeah. That for sure is happening all over the psychedelic industry in general, because psychedelics can lead to a grandiose idea of self, because this big connection and I'm here for a purpose, which you are.
Well, and often that happens through spiritual bypassing.
Completely.
Like taking really high doses, being out in the stratosphere, unity with God. And that's important if we also have unity with all of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And being mindful of all of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any other things that you want to share about KAT that people might not know?
I wonder what people might not know. Probably so many things.
So many things. What do you not know?
I would love a list of questions of what people don't know.
Oh, yes. Send us a list.
And we could answer those. But
we can do a separate video.
I mean, there's always isn't this an anesthetic? Yes, it's also used as an anesthetic. Is it safe? Yes, one of the most safest medicines on the planet. If you go to an emergency room needing care,
it's everywhere.
It's the anesthetic of choice because it works well with any other medication you might be on. Mm-hmm. They use it on babies.
They use it on animals?
They use it on animals. I don't know.
No, you're good. I was thinking one of the things we talk about is kind of the process. We delved into it, but one of the cool things that we have here at Illumma is called the caretaker.
Oh, yeah.
And so in our traditional self-guided rooms, you're monitored. You have a standard blood pressure cuff on. You have some like monitors, stickies on yourself, and we have a big monitor. And really our goal, especially for KAT, is number one, really supporting the container. And the container is Carol and the client. Mm-hmm. And in our other rooms, we have an infusionist. And we wanted it to feel as open and safe as possible. And this is something we really worked with Carol on, is how much can we get out of the room and how non-medical can we make it feel so we can stay in that psychedelic, spiritual space. Mm-hmm. And one of those things was to purchase what's called a caretaker, and it's a monitor, and it only goes around your wrist and your finger. Mm-hmm. And so it's far less invasive than our other monitors. Actually, we're probably going to end up getting them for everybody because we've liked them so much. But it also allows you to be in here solely with the client, which I think has been a nice change. And you're still doing IV. That's the other thing. Yeah. Some KAT is done IM. There's a few you could do oral even. But we use IV just the same. And
yeah, IV is great because you can really dial in a dose,
Very controllable.
Very controllable. IM is pretty
peaky.
Yeah, and oral even has a pretty interesting peak. And this, we find, where's that working space, and you can just stay in it for 45 minutes. It's really amazing. I love the caretaker. It's really fun. And part of what we talked about was if you look at something, what you look at changes. Just like the foundation of quantum physics. So how can we create less change in the environment so the change is happening in the client?
Yes. Yeah, and I think that has really worked out and given people space and connection with you in a different way, which I think is lovely.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah. So what do we have on the horizon, Carol? What are we doing?
I'm working on a training program. It's going to be different than any training program I've been a part of.
Which is a lot.
or I've seen.
Yeah.
It's actually a lot coming from my mentors who studied with Groff for 20 years, and bringing in ways to explore the shadow, ways to help clients, learning more about phenomenology and all the wild things that can be experienced and what do you do about them. There will be an experiential piece, so people who go through my training will experience ketamine, and that is a requirement of my training. People who don't want to experience the medicine, there are plenty of other trainings and I can help them find one that's right for them. But everything that I'm passionate about, everything that has helped me in my own personal work that I've shared with clients and they have found really helpful, that's what I'm bringing into my curriculum. So that's really exciting.
It's going to be amazing. We're really excited about
We're going to bring on a few more therapists here to offer more opportunity for therapists. I'm just one person. I only have so many slots a week.
And she got booked up real fast before I even told anybody she was here.
I know. I'm not even on the website or anything.
She's secret. She's already booked.
And training them. What else are we doing? So many things, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big one. I'm really excited to get the training program up and kind of promoted and, create a safe space here that you can do training in. And then I think the longer term goal for us is really how do we help established ketamine providers facilitate a relationship with a trained therapist and create a KAT program within their practice. Because I know that, a lot of people have gotten in the industry and are from standard medicine, so ER doctors, anesthesiologists like Ken, and started with what they do, which is, I know, drug, ketamine, I can do that. But, you get to a point where you're like, I think we could offer more. And so I think there's a lot of clinics nationally that are looking to expand their practices and offer therapy and have more mental health support in general.
Yeah, and I think, it just happens time and time again where people come in with a big heart wanting to share what they know to be helpful, and people have experiences they're not prepared for.
Yeah.
So I love that you guys support other people opening clinics and letting them know what you've experienced.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to be part of that. And we've been working out kinks on how do we have my model work with your model. And it's taken time and energy, and I'm just glad you have such a wonderful team that has been so supportive and open to me. I had never written a protocol by myself before. So, figuring out every little step involved so that we can help other people do this without recreating a will. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing is, we're creating a model that then can be replicated for people. And that information needs to get out of there because otherwise it's just like everybody trying to do their own thing. And I was like, if we could grease the wheel here.
Yes.
Make a nice smooth wheel for you.
Yes.
Okay, let's think about let's dive into just psychedelics for a few minutes. So how did you get interested in psychedelics the first time? Or what piqued your interest in into psychedelics?
Well, my first foray into the psychedelic world was when I was a teenager.
Like most of us.
And I loved LSD and MDMA and mushrooms. And then I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in my mid-20s. And I was afraid that I might hurt myself on psychedelics. So I stopped doing them. And now I'm learning that it might have been the best thing for me to do back then. There's actually a really great program starting at NYU where they're studying psychedelics and autoimmune diseases.
What?
It's
Whoa.
really cool.
That's
some of the
interesting.
stuff coming out of there is really interesting. And it would be fun to be a research subject in that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was away from it for a long time, and in graduate school about 9 years ago or so, I was doing an independent study because I wanted to know best practices for people with chronic pain, chronic illness, because I wanted to help people like me rewrite their story, from being super athletic and healthy to having physical challenges. And how do you change what you thought life was going to be? Like, I thought that would be my work. And I kept finding myself in the literature, people describing people with chronic illness as being difficult patients, not complying to their protocols, and all this stuff that I realized medical professionals thought about me, but wasn't the case. So I was really struggling, and I talked to my advisor, and she said, I think you need to take a break and go someplace and leave the material behind. And I'm like, I don't know
What does that mean?
where to go. And so I called my uncle, who has 100 acres where I was born and a place that's important to my soul. I went back there, and I was standing in his living room looking at a picture of him on the mantle. And sometimes I cry when I tell the stories. And he just looked beautiful. He was smoking a cigarette, just with this giant smile on his face. And with everything that I had just learned about PTSD and my own PTSD experiences, I stepped closer to the photo, and I'm like, he is disassociated.
Whoa.
And I asked the story. I mean, I had looked at that picture my whole life, and I never asked the story. And I was like, what's going on here? And he said, well, do you see that smoke in the background? Yeah. I'm sitting on top of my tank. It's on fire and disabled. He was in Vietnam. He said, do you see all those lumps on the ground? Those are dead Viet Cong. And I was like, and who else is around? And he was like, the two other people who survived in the tank. One was a Time Life photographer, and one was his friend and him. And they were having cigarettes. And I was
After they survived.
After they survived. And he had had night terrors and PTSD that was very, he didn't talk about much.
Yeah.
We had a long conversation. I helped him find a group at the local VA to start talking about his experience with them. And I dove back into the research, and I saw the connection, and he had a lot of health problems too. And I saw the connection between the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal, which drives the fight or flight response, and how that becomes so enlarged in people's brains with PTSD. And research from MAPS about MDMA and how that changes the structure of the brain and quells the inflammation and decreases the size of that part of the brain and increases the size of the prefrontal cortex. It turned out that MAPS was having a giant conference a few months after that. Psychedelic Science 2017. I went there. So my timeline is wrong. I started school a long time ago, and then I took a big break, and then anyway, I went to the conference, and I was so excited. I came back with stuff to microdose and started applying for MAPS trainings, doing everything I could, talking to other providers in town to see if anyone was doing ketamine. I helped start another ketamine program right after that, and I haven't stopped since.
Here we are.
And here we are.
And now she's the ketamine therapist on Instagram.
The ketamine therapist.
The ketamine therapist. Well, that's beautiful. So what is your, I would just like to get like a short, what?
One other important piece.
Yes.
I was on opiates for pain management for years, over a decade. And I was on all around this time, you know how like the universe just gives you omens over and over when you're supposed to make a big shift?
Yeah.
So I was also at the birth of my niece as I was beginning school, and I looked at the IV that she was getting for the epidural, and there was fentanyl in there. I had a fentanyl patch, 75 milligram fentanyl patch. She was on 15 milligrams of fentanyl giving birth, and I was on 75 going to graduate school, and drove my dad to the hospital that morning. And I knew I needed to do something, and I was lucky enough to be able to participate in a ceremony shortly after that with several different medicines over several days, and I haven't taken an opiate since.
What do you think shifted in that ceremony?
My relationship to pain. It no longer consumed me. It's something that I learned to live with without being controlled by it.
That's awesome.
Just changed my perspective.
Yeah.
Changed my mind.
Changed my mind. There's a good book.
How to change your mind.
Look, it's right here. So where can people find you?
At Illumma.
At Illumma on Instagram. Do you have anything else coming up that you want to talk about? I think we covered everything.
I think I just need to keep writing my curriculum.
The curriculum will be coming soon. So, she is mostly full, but if you're interested in KAT, you can contact the clinic like normal.
I do have a wait list. It's not super long right now.
It's not super long. It's like a few weeks at this point, so it's
and we'll be bringing someone else on because I think it's good to have choices of gender and background and all that to build rapport with someone.
And she's really good friends with that person.
They're actually my MAPS therapy partner, and partner in life is coming.
Yes, Mr. Jordan.
Jordan Avery.
He's amazing. So he'll be coming on shortly, probably later this summer. And we're just going to keep y'all in the loop on everything that we're developing together because I know this is just the beginning of awesome stuff.
Yay!
Yay!
Thank
So,
you.